Welcome to Books and Boulders, the podcast where we take a break from climbing, sit back, and dive into the world of adventure books.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Books and Boulders.
Hey.
I'm Melanie.
And I am Tiffany.
And this is your home away from home, your spot for all things reading, climbing, adventuring. Thank you for joining us on this lovely June day. How are you, Tiff?
So I did a thing.
Okay.
And I think we are kind of now twinsies.
Ooh.
And for those who are not watching us on YouTube, which is fine, I have had locks for over 13 years. And I woke up last week and I didn't want them anymore. And this has been bubbling. This has been bubbling for me because one of the reasons why I kind of stopped filming my climbing I've been having like insecurities about filming my climbing, has nothing to do with my climbing, but I started to notice, and I've known this because I've had two locticians tell me that I have developed alopecia. And it's not one of the more common types that I think most people hear about, like with Jada Pinkett. Mine is traction alopecia, and that is a result of the constant tension of retwisting my locks. And I also used to do a technique called interlocking, which put a lot more tension than just regular palm rolling. Mm-hmm. And so I would watch my climbing videos and I'm like, is that like a bald spot in the back of my head? I'm like, oh no, I think and I just kind of ignored it. But then lately, like the sides of my scalp were really, really thin. Even just watching or seeing photos or videos that were captured at the festival, I'm trying to like, oh, these are edges. This ain't edges. There's no edges. There's nothing edging. So I just got to the point where I was like, this hair is killing my soul. I don't feel pretty. I hate it. And if you notice, in pretty much every video we've recorded, every single one, I'm wearing like a scarf around my edges to hide it, to mask it. And I'm like, I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of masking. And I just want to be done. So I cut them all off. I cut them all off. And I was so happy. And the only reason I didn't walk up in here without a scarf is because I didn't want you to react, Melanie, before I hit record.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
Because don't get it twisted. I love it.
Do you?
I mean,
that's great.
I love it. I'm not fade. I'm bald, and I love it. I don't give a doodly squat if people think I have cancer, if they think, I don't care. You can stare away.
So it's like less hair than me.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not posting like pictures on social media. I'm not making like a whole big thing. I let people know the locks are gone. So when you see me, you're going to see something and it's going to be like it is going to be a minute. And I thought it was going to be a minute for me to adjust. And I was like, I think my head shape is great. Like, no shade. I love the shape of my head. And I'm not even sure if I'll let it grow out to a fade, even if my hair does start to grow back along the sides. Mm-hmm. I think I want it to be bald. I don't want it to have maybe a little light hair, but I don't know. Mm-hmm. We'll see, And I literally, just FYI, I did this 2 hours before we started recording today.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Well, congrats. That's so exciting. What a big change. Welcome to the Bald-Headed Scallywag Club.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for letting me in. I love it here. Oh, it's like I care more about, like I still won't be like going crazy with makeup, but I'm like, I'll wear more makeup. I have all this jewelry that I never wear. And oh my God, the showers. Yes. The showers. I even went swimming 2 days ago because I was waiting on the shaver I got to come in. But I had already cut the locks off. I just needed to like go all the way down. I went swimming and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go swimming every day. I'm just, I don't know. So, I wanted to go to France feeling like I don't care.
Yeah,
I'm more
I'm here.
confident. I feel more confident and so much better about myself than I have in like 10 years. It's
Oh my
crazy.
God. Wow.
So,
That's huge. Oh my God, that's huge. I feel like we could have a whole episode just about this topic alone because I feel that so deeply. Like, I remember when I first cut my hair, I also had locks at the time and was like starting them out and just trying to figure out if I liked them. I like done them myself, and I can be very OCD about parting. And I didn't really like the parts, so I was just like, I'm not happy with this. I just cut them off. Um, and yeah, my cousin, I remember my cousin, the first time I cut my hair or was about to cut my hair, I was living in Texas, and my cousin was like, "You're gonna cry when you cut your hair." I was like so worried, and I immediately loved it. Like I was like, this just feels right, and
yeah.
I had never felt like more, yeah, confident, comfortable in my skin. I had never felt more feminine before I cut my hair until
Right?
after. Like I feel so much more, even within this grungy little t-shirt with my ashy hands. I feel more feminine than I've ever felt like having hair. And yeah, it just feels right. Sometimes I do have the urge to start growing my hair back out, but I don't know. There's also that transition phase where it's like a
Yeah.
certain length where it's like that awkwardy sort of phase, and I don't think I'm ready to endure that. But also like I don't know. Every time I realistically start the process of growing my hair out, I'm like nah, and I just go back. So yeah, I don't know. I love it. Yay! Welcome to the bald headed baddies club.
Yes. Hashtag ballhead baddies. I I have no words. I don't know. And all these things I was worried about, like, oh, the discoloration in my hair and patches and this. And I got this, like, I have a very prominent mole on my head. And I'm like, it never has been so obvious. And my dad had the same thing. I actually have
Hmm.
two moles in the same places that he had them. And I love the mole now with no hair than when it was kind of just like randomly there. I don't know.
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
know, but all I do know is like, feel free to comment. Like, I think the pressure that women have felt about hair, and mind you, I love black hair. I love the
Hmm.
fros, I love the braids, I love the creativity,
Hmm.
but it is such a stronghold to constantly maintain these things that I feel like it just takes away a part of you,
Yeah.
and it's such a big part of you that it's like I can't even focus on these other elements of myself anymore.
Yeah. Like
So
literally
it
wash
just,
days, entire days
yeah,
dedicated to washing and styling your hair. Like it's a lot.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just doing the most, and I don't know, I just feel free. I feel weirdly
Mm,
freed from the shackles of something. I don't know.
yeah.
I was even like, I'm like too afraid to even date because I'm so insecure about how my hair is. I'm like, give me all the pictures. Make sure you see all the angles, boo boo, so
You
you
about
know
to
what
be in
is
France
happening.
like
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And then I was like, and to some degree now, like having a bald head is almost like high fashion. Like
Mhm.
it's become more trendy. You know, you got the Lapitas and like, so it's not even
Mm.
that big of a taboo. I just, I don't know. I'm like, I don't care. I love my skin. I love my tone.
Yes. Oh my
Y'all.
God. This is
So,
wow. Also, I
but
had no
yes.
idea that Lupita was 42 years old. That's insane. She does not look a day over like 35 at best. Like she looks like a
Yeah.
baby.
Hmm.
She's so youthful looking. That's wild. But anyways, wow, well that's amazing. Congratulations. I'm very excited for you in this new chapter of your hair slash no hair journey.
Yeah. So expect all the photos and font. Just my head is going to be out. So if
Oh my God.
you feel free, Black Girls Boulder on Instagram, that's where all my climbing content goes. If you want to see the baldy love, it's going to be all out,
Woo.
sunscreened up. So
Nice.
yeah.
Cool. Well, cool.
Sorry to hijack your how are you doing?
No, that's okay. That was great. I mean, I asked you how you were doing, and that was great. I am delighted.
Can I
Yeah.
say one thing about these chapters
Sure.
though? They
Okay.
got me shook.
I
These chapters,
know.
these were, like I don't remember which ones in the previous book, but in Lynn's book there was like a man, these really hit me. This was the
Mm,
group of chapters that like I
I
was like,
know.
"Oh, oh,
Yeah.
I don't know nothing about nothing."
Yeah,
So
I
that's
know.
just as a preemptive like I was just like, "Wow." And now I'm like in love with this book and I need everybody to read this book.
Yeah. Like the first few chapters, I was like, okay, this is cool. Like, okay, okay, cool, cool, cool. And then this chapter, I was like, oh, she's getting into it. Like, we're
Yeah.
going deep.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I feel you. And I wish like I told you before we started recording that I finished reading these chapters this morning, but I really wish that I had, and I definitely plan to spend more time, but I wish I'd given myself more time to like really sit with all of this because it was like
Yeah.
it was rich and it was like some heavy stuff and it was beautiful and it was emotional and it was all very intense. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Shall we dive in?
Let's dive. I mean, now we both prepared to dive. So we got to go on a diving
Yeah.
trip.
Ooh,
We ain't got
okay.
to
One
worry
thing.
about
Yes. Oh
we ain't got to worry about helmets. We can go dive every day like,
oh
and
my God,
still
I
look
want
good
to
when we
so
go out
bad.
later at night.
Yes, I want to so bad. Like legitimately, I think I would be so down to plan a diving trip with you. But one thing that I will say about having a bald head that you probably maybe you've picked up on this, maybe you haven't because it's summertime. But wow, the only thing I don't like about having a bald head is just how cold it
Yes.
gets. Like
No,
it
no,
gets
I've
so
already felt it.
freaking cold.
Why to
Like
be
after a
honest,
fresh cut.
part of why I don't want to take this off is because I'm going to feel that breeze and I'm in a hot garage right now. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do, but the funny thing about that is I look so cute with a little beanie. And because I'm
Period.
sewing, I'm about to start making my own like custom beanies. I'm thinking about even
Ooh,
crocheting some so I can have kind of a
cute.
lightweight summery beanie. But
Yes.
yes, I think year round the breeze.
Yeah.
I even want to make like some hooded jumpsuits, that like
Mm.
I could climb in this like cute jumper, but it also has a
Ooh.
hood because my head's gonna get cold.
Cute, like a little onesie.
Yes, yes,
Cute.
yes.
Oh
I
my
I
God.
I'm in it. I welcome the code.
Yes, yeah, it's worth it. You adapt, and yeah, you like. I feel like my ears disappear when I wear a beanie, so I'm not as big a fan of the beanies, but I will do what I have to do. I love having my hair bald, and yeah, I think it's
But you
totally
look
worth
cute
it.
in hats. I will
Thank
say.
you. I do
I
like a
feel
little cap
yeah.
situation. Yeah.
Yeah, you look really good in caps. I don't know that I can pull off a cap because I actually have to
Hmm.
do like a trail day this weekend and I'm thinking about should I wear a hat? Like not because I'm trying to hide it, but to be honest, I'm also not trying to get sunburnt on my head. Even though I
Yeah.
can wear sunscreen, I don't want to be out in the sun all day with just my head out. Like
Yeah. I hear
personally,
that.
especially
Yeah.
it being so fresh and raw, I'm not quite sure that I like even when I go out in my garden, I'm putting this on because,
Hmm.
and it's not like I said, I'm not hiding. Trust me, this ain't. There is no shame in my
I am
game,
out
but
and proud.
facts.
Nice.
Um, but yeah, we will be going on a diving trip. I don't know. It may not be this year. It may be next
Yay.
winter.
Yeah.
Or
Ooh.
but or this coming winter. But
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Okay, great. We'll talk offline. We'll circle back. But okay, cool. All right. Well, I guess I mean so I tried to capture some notes, but
I took a
God, these
lot of
chapters
notes.
were so I did yeah, I did too. I feel like these chapters were so rich and I'm trying to think about like you know, because I feel like right, the actual sequence and the timeline of events is important, but it's also like there's so many just like things that resonated that I really want to touch on. But I guess just to really kind of quickly summarize chapter 7 and then maybe we can kind of get into the details of what we were thinking and feeling. Yeah, chapter 7 in chapter 6, she was in Mozambique. I don't quite remember how that chapter ended, but I think basically she just kind of wrapped up her travels there. And in
Hmm.
chapter 7, she is in South Africa.
Yeah.
Um, have you ever been to South
Okay.
Africa?
No, but it's where I really, really want to go this December because I want to go to the Rocklands. So,
Yeah,
if
cool.
anyone listening isn't
Ooh.
aware, one of the most famous bouldering destinations in all of the
Ooh.
world is in South Africa. Very few black people actually go there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's just a dust. And it's like, it's almost like font. It reminds me of font, just the
Hmm.
ridiculous amounts of boulders. Like, so when I saw
Ooh.
South Africa, I was like, yes, because you do fly into Cape Town and you, oh, yes, and then you have to drive
Yeah.
south like some hours or something.
Cool. Yeah. I is there rope climbing there too, or no? Is it mostly just bouldering?
Not in the Rocklands. I do
Okay.
think there might be some ropes near,
Hmm.
not in Cape Town either. I don't believe, but don't quote me
Hmm.
on that because I don't. It's hard for me to want to go on. I don't have any like climbing rope people who would travel with me and with bouldering. I
Hmm.
feel like I can go solo and be
Hmm.
fine.
I would travel for ropes, just so you
I know.
know.
I'm just the
Hmm.
rope thing is I'm still I'm here on ropes.
I hear
You
you.
know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm and then it's like rope climbing with somebody who doesn't have 30 plus years experience. I'm like I need a guy.
Mm.
I'm even guides to some degree in other countries I'm still nervous about. Like
Hmm.
I gotta work on that, but I ain't there
Yeah.
yet. So
Okay, I feel that. Well, South Africa. So much happens in this chapter, but she's visiting South Africa. This is the site. Well, so she's visiting South Africa. Specifically, she's near the Cape of Good Hope. And these are the waters where the Sao Jose Paquete de Africa, the slave ship that she was exploring, or she started her exploration into Mozambique. It was a slave ship that we first learned about in chapter 6, carrying captive enslaved Africans from Mozambique, and they were on their way to Brazil. And the slave ship wrecked in this part of South Africa. Um, and she just yeah, she's traveling, learning about the history. When she gets there, she wants to try to dive the slave wreck site, but
wah
she heeds
wah.
she heeds the advice of people who are more experienced than her and decides not to dive it. And she ends up, yeah, just kind of like visiting museums and talking with historians and archivists. Archivists, is that the word?
Mhm.
About the history of this ship and about the history of, yeah, their kind of like relationship. Not even their relationship. It's so much. But she talks about she learns about the history of this ship, and she also learns about the history of apartheid and how it kind of like spurred from slavery, and a lot about how
Or the Jim Crow movement. I think they even said that some folks went over to the U.S. to
yeah.
study the Jim Crow movement or laws and brought that back to SA.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it sounded like she basically said that like apartheid originated with slavery. So, like, the Dutch people came to South Africa. They utilized slave labor because it was cheap and they wanted to build up that part of South Africa. And then this basically translated into, even though the local, like, indigenous South Africans were not enslaved, they kind of like still treated them the same way that they treated enslaved people. And yes, she did mention that like people went to the United States to learn about Jim Crow and kind of like adopted some of their policies and brought them back to South Africa to kind of like create this institution of apartheid. Um, and yeah, she meets so many people. One of the huge kind of like recognizable names that she meets is this man named Albie Sachs, who was this court justice. It sounded like he was like this court justice, and I guess what's maybe the equivalent of like the Supreme Court in South Africa.
Hmm.
Um, and he was also this well revered anti apartheid activist. He had just a ton of achievements that I didn't even write down, but he, like he really he was about that life.
He was the real deal. Yeah, yeah. I actually had to go back. I was like, wait, is he white? Cause
He like really putting his life on the line.
Wait, he lost a whole arm? Like, no,
Yeah.
let me flip it. I was like, and I said, white, Jewish. What damn?
Right.
What damn? Go
Yeah.
off, Albie.
Yeah, I can't recall, but I know he lost an arm, and I think she maybe said that he went blind in one
Yeah,
eye. I could be.
there was yeah, he has an issue with one of his eyes, like from
Okay.
the bomb.
Yeah, he got his
Yeah.
car bombed, while he was kind of like in this fight for liberation for Black people in South Africa. And he also tells her about this sort of ceremony that they hosted at his home for I'm going to try to get this history. I'm going to try to articulate this well. Senor, oh my gosh. Help me out. What's his name? Don't laugh at me.
I can't help. I'm so sorry. I left my books. My book is on the couch.
Yeah, but it's on the couch. No, Todd. Loading. Okay, I don't remember the man's name, but he was a leader of the Mozambican people, and he asked the crew for the Slaves Wreck Project to take soil from Mozambique and bring it back to the slave site. I guess as a symbol to kind of like reunite these
home.
yeah, these enslaved Africans to with their homeland. And so he tells her about that ceremony, and God, there's so much here. But she learns a lot just about the Slaves Works Project through him. And let's see what else happened. So she just has a ton of experiences there. She meets Black locals, and she's expecting to feel welcomed by them, but she has similar feelings of when she was in Mozambique, of just kind of being this American tourist that locals want to exploit for money. She talks about meeting this artist, this South African artist, and thinking like that, they're forming a friendship, and he invites her to his gallery, and she realizes that he kind of only invited her because he was hoping that she would buy
Yeah.
his portraits. And she also has this interaction where she's at a restaurant with a friend of a friend, and this person is a member of the Zulu ethnic group. I don't know a ton about them, but they're kind of one of the most powerful and well recognized
Yeah.
African ethnic groups. And he kind of berates this elderly indigenous South African waiter who I guess messes up their order or something like that. And she starts thinking a lot more deeply about like all of these different intersections, and how like of gender and class and ethnic groups, and how all of these kind of like create this undercurrent of some of the social disparities between Black people in Africa. And I think she had this going into it, she had this kind of like somewhat naive maybe mindset of like, oh, we're all one, and African
Yeah.
people in Africa must all just like get along and have unity, and not really realizing like that
No.
there is just
Like
so much
there's a
nuance.
disconnect.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing about reading that is I feel like every Black American who goes to Africa actually thinks this. Because
Yeah.
that reading this, I'll be honest, has given me a whole new perspective about going to Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Like things, and it has me thinking more about things that I never thought about.
Hmm.
And because I felt like, fam, what it
Mm-hmm.
do? Like I thought it would be like that too. Like I'm back. Did you miss me? And it's like, bitch,
Yeah.
this ain't your house. Like we don't know
Yeah.
you like that. And
Yeah.
so I was like, I don't know. I was just like, I think I wrote it down. Um, but it just made me think about things that I never would have thought of
Mm-hmm.
going into visiting Africa, and how I might be perceived.
Yeah. Like she talked about how I think this might have happened in the next chapter, but she talks about like going into immigration, and shoot. I just lost my train of thought. No. Anyway, she talks about God, what was it? I think she just talked about crap. I don't
I
remember.
felt like one of the things I know she really kind of captured in this is just that privilege. You know,
Yeah.
it's this dynamic of Black American privilege
Yeah.
over Africans,
Yeah.
and there's no matter, it's almost like no matter what you do, there is an imbalance. There we're not the
Totally.
same. And the irony though is that's in the continent of Africa. When we get into the whole United States of America, we're not the privileged.
So
So
different.
it's like,
Yeah.
so it was like a kind of like a mind bleep for her to be like, wow,
Yeah.
y'all see me as like that girl, but then when I go home, I'm not that
Right.
girl.
Yeah.
And
I'm at the
so
bottom of the totem pole.
it's like as
Yeah.
she already kind of went on this journey to find home, to find a sense of being.
Hmm.
And now it's almost like she's even more confused about where she fits in
Yeah.
more than
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah, a lot of that really. So I think the thing I was going to say was that she mentioned like going to immigration and she expected um the immigration officer to ask her for a bribe. And I have myself never been to Africa, but I've heard that like, in certain countries bribery is a huge thing. Like, like it's just, I think there is just like a lot of political corruption, not unlike
Yes.
America. Um, but yeah, how bribery is just like kind of a big thing. And it's just wild to think like, right, you go here expecting these people to like see you as kinfolk and they don't. They see you as American before they see you as um
It's
African
black.
and
Yeah.
yeah, as black and yeah, I don't know. It's just a really interesting thing to think about. One of the things that I've always wanted to do was take an ancestry test and then visit the countries that
Me
my
too.
ancestry revealed. And I actually Ancestry is doing a Father's Day sale, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and get that kit
Oh,
because it's
word.
$40 now. So yeah, so yeah, I think I'm gonna go ahead and get the kit. I'm gonna pull the trigger. I was like thinking like I'm not gonna get the kit because like what if they have my DNA? They're gonna try to clone me, and it's like girl, relax.
Oh,
Like first of all, they already have your DNA probably, and if they don't,
yeah.
they can get it. Second of
They
all,
got
like
I
you're
mean, I think when you go into the airport now and they scan your face and it's like we delete it right after. I'm like, yeah, I'm
please
so sure.
stop. Okay. Right. Yeah. And then it's like, my digital footprint, I don't even be using the internet like that. I mean, I do, but I've tried to avoid social media. But, it's like my digital footprint is so detailed at this point that anything that anybody with any sort of technological skills wanted to know about me, they could find out. And also, I ain't nobody. Like, what do they want to know about me? So yeah, I don't know. I think I'm gonna go ahead and do it. But anyways, yeah, it was very like humbling and a good reminder to think that like even if and it's still something that I want to do. I still want to like I want to know where my ancestors
Yeah.
came from, and I want to know what my ancestral homeland looks like. Um, but even if I do that, to not expect to like immediately be embraced or welcomed or to feel, this immediate connection to these people, which is very real and also very devastating. But I don't know. It is
Yeah,
what it
I
is.
mean, and you have the book in front of you,
Hmm.
and I intended on having the book in front of me. But if you go to page 209, 208,
Oh, okay.
I'm giving you instructions. I I want
Chapter
you to
7, verse.
I know. Look, yo, this feels like gospel. But there's a paragraph at
Hmm.
kind of towards the end of this chapter
Hmm.
that starts out with like how the transatlantic slave trade on the bottom of 208,
Uh-huh.
and then it ends with people most affected don't realize it. If you find that,
Yeah, I
you
see
should
it. The
read
entire
that.
thing? Okay,
Yeah,
sure.
read starting at how the transatlantic slave trade.
And I definitely did highlight that section.
Yeah, I read
Okay.
it twice because I was like, Damn.
Yeah. Right. Okay, here we go. Reading from the book of Written in the Waters. Bottom time. Sorry.
Ezekiel 224.
So she says, as the sky gradually lightens, I think about how an economic downturn throughout Europe in the 1500s, shrinking markets and dismal economic forecasts led to the transatlantic slave trade. How the transatlantic slave trade, selling and enslaving Africans and those indigenous to the Americans in Southeast Asia for profit, led to a justification for racism. How systemic racism, building systems and policies that create inequitable opportunities and outcomes for people based on race, led to colonialism. How colonialism, the creation of settlements in distant territories by a country intending to exploit the place economically, led to imperialism. How imperialism, the expansion of the ideology of a country into an empire that operates around the world with a sense of superiority and dominates culturally, economically, and politically, led to a little black girl from Atlanta sitting on a rooftop in Johannesburg, feeling a certain way. Overwhelmed, tired, sad, powerless to change centuries old narratives of capitalism, which undergird it all, and race so deeply entrenched that even the people most affected don't realize it.
My
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
I mean, this it's centuries of trauma. It's
Yeah.
centuries. And I know when we get to another chapter, like there's going to be mention of how it's compounded, like centuries of systematic racism, systematic trauma with no true healing opportunity, like at all, at any point.
Yeah.
And it's like, and when you think about how she feels so disconnected and she's there, these communities look at her, to me,
Mm-hmm.
almost like the oppressor in some way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you got all the money, help us, or like it just, I don't know. I just,
Mm-hmm.
this was like the moment that paragraph for me was like the moment where I started to feel, it was almost like watching a horror movie, and
Hmm.
that feeling you get after the movie ends and you're like, man, can somebody turn a light on before I go to the bathroom? Like, I don't really know if I want to get out of this bed right now. Like,
Yeah.
it just felt spooky.
Hmm.
Like, feeling the reality of the history. Because I feel like our textbooks and our
Yeah.
schooling is so watered down that I don't really feel. It's like, and to be honest, because of it, it's also like she mentioned earlier on how she doesn't even want to watch the movies about slavery
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like there's so much more to these stories that aren't being told
Yeah.
that I wish I knew more about, that I would watch that movie, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't I don't know. That just, I don't know, that just hit for me, and I just wondered about the many people in the projects all over the US and how all of this has just stemmed from this movement.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, that's just one consequence. Like, that specific experience of, like, you know, poorer people in the projects in America, that's just like one consequence or reality that stem from this. You know, there's so many other experiences
Mm-hmm.
within America itself that kind of ladder up to this. And then we think about experiences in other countries. Like, I mean, I think she spends a lot of time talking and like hinting, or not even hinting, but just kind of like getting at sort of the consequences that this has had for African people. And I'm really excited to dive into chapter 9, I want to say, because I feel like she kind of like takes all of these experiences that she had in these different countries and ties them together into like a real, like, you know, cohesive reflection.
Yeah, like an awakening. If it does feel like chapter 9 is like this moment of awakening, because between 7 and 8 it really just like wraps everything up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's heavy. I remember just feeling like, also like, wow. And I think her friend, well, I won't jump too far ahead, but just kind of like, yeah, not only what this means for Black Americans, but Black people all over the continent. Because I think in every country, like Black people have experienced, colonialization and being sort of like the subjugated to, yeah, these institutions and not even really being able to really scratch the surface of the ways that that's impacted us. It is
Yeah.
pretty wild.
Yeah. And we don't need reparations, so, we're good. We're all
Oh, we
good
don't?
apparently.
It's like, wait, what?
This is
I would like some.
We're good. We're fine. We're equal. Everything's all good. Yeah.
Okay.
And then this does lead to your, you wanting to get your ancestry.com. She did the same thing where she got her ancestry done and found out that most of her lineage could be tracked back to what was it, Benin and Togo.
Exactly. And so what led up to that, just really quickly, is this conversation, because I think we'll kind of like circle back to this, but she ends up going to this New Year's Eve ceremony in a South African
Right.
church.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and apparently,
The party that never ends.
right? I'm
This
like,
is
South
the
African
party
people get
that
lit.
never ends. We go stay up all night, my friends. I was getting tired. I was like, I would have been home.
Yeah, 5 a.m. They were up, just praising and worshiping. And yeah, what's interesting is she gets kind of reminded of this aspect of the American culture of gospel music, and like, I don't know, it's kind of like this, like, it comes full circle for a moment for her, I think, because she's like, wow, this reminds me so much of like the way that like Black people praise and worship in churches across America, especially in the Deep South. And then she's like, but of course it would connect because, like, the enslaved Africans brought so much of their culture from Africa. Like, there are so many just like themes and undertones, like rhythm and like, percussion and like, the singing and and the instrumentation, and like all of that was taken from Africa by the enslaved Africans to the Americas. And then it was kind of like, it sort of like diverged into its own culture, but it makes sense that it would then, I don't know, it's just interesting to think that it was then like readopted by indigenous African people.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But the identity of it is American. Like, this is an American music thing,
right,
or an American cultural thing that came from a place that's back to the place. Like,
yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, it was like born from, like, it is a child of kind of like African culture, and then kind of like readopted by African people. So I don't know. I thought that was really interesting. I watched a documentary recently about funk music and how Fela Kuti was, he is this, or I think he's passed away now, but he was like one of the godfathers of like Afrobeats music, and how he was inspired by funk music. And it's interesting to think how funk music was likely inspired by the music that traditionally came from parts of Africa. So I don't know. It's just really interesting to think that it's this like cycle that
like
these cultures do feed into one another and like feed off of one another. And we can't say that there's not a connection. There is most definitely a connection, but we're having to, and I think what a lot of this book and a lot of her experience in this book is like having to kind of like, I don't know, sort of like redefine what our relationship is, if that is something that can be done to Africa. But anyways, on her way home from this New Year's Eve service, she's in the car, and she's in the car with a couple of people that were at the service, and one of them is this woman named Anna, who really kind of challenges her and grills her on her religious beliefs and makes some presumptions about how Black Americans are basically lost and don't really have a culture of their own, and how she almost pities them because she sees them as like this lost child who, you know, has been orphaned and has been adopted and is now trying to like find their roots and look for their family. And I think that in a lot of ways, you know, I think she's wrong about the culture thing. I'm gonna just say that.
Yeah.
And Tara,
She probably never been to America either. So
yeah, and Tara, like, you know, she calls that out, and I think that she definitely like, you know, I think on the one hand, she's like, you know, I know who I am and I know where my spirituality comes from. And I feel very confident and affirmed in that. And I also know that Black people have a very rich culture, or Black Americans have a very rich culture. But there is something that Anna says that really sticks with her. And, yeah, kind of grates at her a little bit. And I think as much as she was probably frustrated by that conversation, it did spark something in her to think like, I probably need to be making this journey a little bit more personal. And that is what inspires her to take the trip to Benin and Togo. And yeah, she remembers that her ancestry is deeply rooted in Benin and Togo. And so she decides to pivot her trip a little bit and spend some time in these countries. And that takes us into chapter 8.
yes, chapter
Yeah.
8.
Chapter 8. Yeah. Whew. Also, a lot happened.
Yeah, and is chapter 8 the end of the middle section? Because you know, there's like it's like broken up into 3 parts. I can't remember if the where the next section begins. If it's chapter 9 or 10.
The
You know,
next
there's like
section,
the ascent.
right? This section is bottom time.
Okay.
The next section is part 3, ascent. And yeah, this section includes, I think, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay. Cool.
yeah,
Cool. Cool.
so all of 9 is also contained within this chapter, and then 10, which is like 2 pages long. But we'll get to that next week, or in the next episode. Um, but yeah, so chapter 8, Benin and Togo. I don't, yeah, I'm like trying to decide, should I give a summary or should we get into just like some of the initial things that struck us? I guess just to give a very, very quick summary.
Yeah.
Yeah, she travels to Benin and Togo. I think initially she's feeling very excited and feeling like in some ways she's found her people. Specifically, she recognizes a lot of similarities in like the physical features between herself and members of her family and the local people from Benin and Togo. She learns a lot about the history there, and a lot about European settlement and colonization, about how Togo eventually regains their independence and becomes like split into 2 countries, Benin and Togo. Um, she travels to this historic town in the middle of Benin, to kind of like visit this community that is built on top of a lake. Um,
Yeah.
and
I
she
guess
feels
it's like Venice, right?
right. Yeah.
So it's essentially an island. I think
Yeah. Yeah.
that people have built these like homes on stilts.
Right. Yeah, they built these homes on stilts, and then they also were kind of able to like make makeshift land because they procured soil from the homeland. So they call it the Venice of Africa, kind of paying homage to Venice in Italy. I don't know if there's any relationship. I don't think she doesn't mention that Italian people colonized this place, but I think it's just kind of like recognizing that there's a similar city in Italy. Um, she has some conflicts about feeling like a little bit voyeuristic. And then the chapter kind of wraps up with her kind of talking about heritage tourism and some of the conflict that she had, some of the conflicting feelings that she has about that. And I think there's a lot that I want to dig into here, but I guess one of the first things that was really exciting for me is she she hires this tour guide to take her around Benin and Togo, and he tells her about the different ethnic groups in Benin
Does
and
it?
Togo. Yeah, and one of the major groups, or the biggest group, he says, is this group called Iwe.
Yes.
And if we recall,
E-way.
yeah,
E-way.
yeah.
Yes.
And so yeah, if we recall from I think like chapter 6, that was like a word that that occurred to her in a dream, and she like had no idea what it meant, but she wrote it down, and I knew we would circle back to it, but that gave me chills like reading that. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, she mentions being a very spiritual person, and I feel like she's like really tapped in.
Yeah. I was gonna say, do you believe in that stuff like that things can speak to you, or have you ever had like not a premonition but felt like you had
Yeah.
deja vu?
I've definitely had deja vu, but not in the way that like most people kind of just experience it, not in like a spiritual way. I believe in it. I believe that it exists. I believe that it happens to people. I believe that energy can transcend lifetimes. I personally haven't experienced it myself, but I also feel like you probably have to really be tapped into your spirituality in order to be able to like perceive those energetic
Yeah.
communications. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I 100%. I mean, but I'm also a woo-woo lover. Like I 100% believe in that. And I I knew I obviously we knew this was going to come back uh
Hmm.
up in some at some point,
Hmm.
but the reason I think it's more interesting cuz it's not just like, oh, I had this, because I've had dreams and I never write them down. And so I think it
Hmm.
was cool by the fact that she actually kind of has proof that this
Yeah.
thing that, like that this thing that she typed in her phone on this date that you can see now connects to her culture,
Hmm.
or her lineage, I guess. Maybe I won't say her culture, but you know, it connects back to her history. And I don't know, I thought it was super cool. I was like, yes, go off, Eway. Go off.
Yeah. I wonder, like, I mean, I don't think that just kind of like the 23andMe and the ancestry.com, I don't think that they get super deep into like your like any tribal groups that you might have ancestry in. But I know that there are tests like African ancestry
Hmm.
that actually take a much deeper dive, and they don't just tell you the country where your ancestors might have come from, but they also tell you like the tribes and the clans and the ethnic groups that they were a part of. And so I don't know. I don't know how deeply she's investigated this, but I wonder if Iwe is like the specific ethnic group that her ancestry is rooted in. But I don't know. I'd
I
be
mean, it was the
curious to
biggest
know.
tribal group, so I think there's
Yeah.
a strong possibility. And even if it wasn't like, I'm sure she's a descendant of someone from there. Like,
Mm-hmm.
who knows? There's so many
Yeah.
though. There's so many tribes. Like, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
when somebody broke down the like amount of countries and then the amount of languages in one country, I was like, oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Like seeing
Yeah.
those numbers really kind of had me like, I don't know anything. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
we know that there's people who think like Africa's a country, so that's a whole thing. But it's like when you realize the sheer size of it, I think when they were talking about, the guy with the map was talking about like how you can fit the United States and
All these
Europe
different
inside of
countries.
Africa and still got some room to grow. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like I think it's big, but you don't really realize it. And I like how he was making the point of, because these map makers put Africa down in the bottom like this little thing, like this little
Hmm.
afterthought, when it could take up the whole map. Like,
Yeah. I remember like looking at globes and just then like I think Google Maps does a better job of portraying it pretty accurately, but I remember like certainly looking at globes, like physical globes as a kid and being like astounded by like how big Africa actually was in comparison when I saw like a more realistic portrayal of it. Um on Google Maps. That is so crazy to me. Like to like just lie, about
yeah.
like the size of this country. Like,
Hmm.
girl, stop. Like but anyways,
Yeah, like it was an
um
afterthought. Like, oh yeah, put that little thing down there somewhere. We'll worry about that later.
yeah, right. Okay. Anyways, Africa's enormous. Yeah, she says that. I mean, so there are 54 countries, which actually surprised me. I would have somehow I might have thought that there would have been more countries than that, but more than 3,000 ethnicities and like around 2,000 languages. So yeah, that was pretty wild to me. Um, but yeah, gosh, what else? So I also really wanted to talk about this town of Gavin,
Oh,
Gavin. I don't
Gambier.
Ganvia. How do you?
But only because I'm studying French, I feel like it's
Ganvia.
pronounced
Ooh,
Gambier, but I could
Ganvia.
be wrong
Okay.
because of the accent over
Ooh,
the E.
okay. Okay. I'm trying to find. God, they were so. This
So,
chapter was wild.
yeah. So Gambier was that town you were talking about, the floating town, and how they
Mm-hmm.
had like water
Yes.
streets. So I think one thing I wanted to talk about that was super interesting that kind of goes back to the fact that she decided to use a tour guide instead of just kind of like going on her own,
Mm.
and the constant interactions that she had by
Mm-hmm.
using a tour guide that she probably
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have if she had just kind of went solo. You know, like when she
Mm-hmm.
got up to do that rope thing, and he was like, "No,
Mm.
get up there and do that." And they looking at her like, "Sis, what are you doing? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why
I
are
would have
you
felt so
here right now?"
awkward.
I mean, honestly, I feel like 80% of this chapter, she felt so uncomfortable. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she felt like she felt invasive, I feel like she
Mm-hmm.
felt like, even when they're looking at the town. And then the fact that, too, on a lot of these tours, she would be the only black person. It would
Mm-hmm.
always be
Mm-hmm.
these like white European people, and so they're on the boat looking at
Mm-hmm.
these people like they're zoo animals as they're just living
Right.
their life, which,
Yeah.
yes, you need tourism, but I don't know. Like, I don't know that I could do that. I mean, if I'm
Yeah.
going to this town because I'm about to go buy some papaya, I don't know, something native to the area, or like, or there's something on the town site to see, but just to
Mm-hmm.
like stare at people living life, that couldn't been
Yeah.
me. That could not have been me. I'd be
Yeah.
like, you know what? Can we take this boat back? I need to go home.
Yeah. Yeah. She talks about how, like, to get to this community, you have to take a boat from the mainland. And when they were boarding the boat, it was like her, a bunch of white tourists. Um, they may have been from Europe. They also may have been from somewhere else in Africa. But either way, it was a bunch of white tourists. And then it was like a bunch of local people. And how, she and the white tourists had the privilege of boarding the boat first and getting the best seats on the boat, and she felt really uncomfortable with that. And she was like, I think she thought about protesting, and like they were like, no, just get on the boat, it's fine, it's okay, get on. But she felt really uncomfortable with the fact that like she was getting prioritized over these like local people.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and I don't know, I think I respect her a lot for that, and I feel like I would have felt very similarly. But
Yeah.
then even after she gets there, right, like just talking about how they're kind of like riding around, like watching people kind of like live their daily lives, and it feels like this sort of voyeurism. And
Yeah.
yeah, she mentions that
Yeah.
like there's like almost this like implicit like agreement between the local people and the kind of like tourism industry, because these people, I guess, are agreeing to somewhat exploit themselves because they know that it'll be somewhat economically beneficial for them. And she talks about how living in Harlem, there were like all of a sudden these like tour buses, and I feel like I might even know the tour buses that she's talking about, that would just
Oh
like
yeah,
ride
the
through
jump on, hop
the little
off
double
bus.
decker joints. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And how they would like, run around, run through the streets of Harlem, and the tourists would take pictures, which is just so bizarre to me. Like, I don't know. I don't agree with it in general, like this kind of like voyeurism. Like, I'm super uncomfortable with it. But it's one thing to think about it from like people of one country going to another country to do that. It's something totally different to think about Americans doing that to other Americans. Like something, I'm just like, what have you, what? It's just
Yeah.
Harlem. Like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. It's, but I mean, and I know Harlem has like a really rich history, but to think of like Harlem being like made a spectacle in that way, I was like, that's so surprising. I had never really
It's
thought
really
about it,
fascinating
but
too because of the gentrification of Harlem. So it's like
Mhm.
this Harlem Renaissance ultra black history that, yeah, you rolling through Harlem and that is not what you're going to see. And if anything, certain
Yeah.
parts of Harlem you're going to see the poverty and the result of the epidemic and other things
Hmm.
that impacted the city.
Yeah.
Stop and frisk, like just the constant
Mm,
attacks. So it's like
yeah.
you're witnessing people in a livelihood that's not that lively, that's not that rich,
Yeah.
and okay, maybe the
But it,
country
hmm.
of maybe Benin or Gambier is profiting from it, but are those people directly? That's why I said, like, it'd been one thing if they were actually supporting the people who lived on that island in some way, but I'm like, but who's actually profiting from this tour ride? you know
Yeah.
it is it the government? Because I don't know that it is the people. you
Yeah.
know and I mean, grant, I don't know
Hmm.
what they're giving to their people. I don't know what kind of benefits or support that they get, like, from this, but I just there was just something about these sort of conversations or these examples of making people almost feel like animals, or I wrote down, like, the guy that they put in a cage in the Bronx Zoo, um
Yeah. Yeah. So I def
Otabinga.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to get to that. There was something you said that struck me and I literally like totally forgot it. But I did have another thought of just like, I don't know, like it reminded me of like there was one time that I went to Jamaica and my friend had like kind of arranged this tour and it ended up not really being what we expected. But while we were there, we're like in the Jamaican countryside and it's like there are like people, literally like, just living their lives, like bathing outside in like buckets of water. And I was just like, I feel weird right now. Like I didn't sign up to just see a random lady like taking a bath outside of her house. And I felt just generally uncomfortable
Yeah.
with the idea of it. Um, and then and then I remember like this time that I went to Hawaii and um I should have known just by the fact that this was hosted at like a Hilton hotel that it was going to be problematic. But it was like this luau that they hosted
Mm-hmm.
at the hotel and there was like, this buffet and then there were like all of these it was like representation of all of these like um Pacific Island, like Polynesian and like
Yep.
Micronesian countries.
Yep.
And they like I don't know. It was like I don't know.
I've seen the same luau, I promise you.
Yeah.
I've
I
been to
hated it.
two I've been to two Hawaiian islands, and I've seen the fire and the this and the that. Like,
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
And I couldn't tell, like I couldn't tell you I don't have enough, education in like Polynesian history or culture, but the costumes didn't really feel like authentic. The wardrobes didn't really feel authentic. Like it just felt like a minstrel show and I just
Yeah.
felt like this like I hated it. I was so uncomfortable the entire time. Like I was like, this is these people's culture. It's like deeply personal and intimate. And I just feel so wrong coming here and like, I don't know. Like I just don't like the idea of like making a spectacle. Like I prefer the idea of approaching a culture with like humility and respect and like a
Yeah.
willingness to like learn and knowing that you're a visitor and a guest. And it was just like a bunch of like white American tourists. And it was just like that kind of like very, I feel like I've seen like cartoons that kind of like display an American tourists. And it's usually like, older white people from the Middle West. This is not, I don't mean to like be body shaming, but like they tend to be like really overweight and just like really shitty
Did you call us the
t-shirts.
Middle West? You
No, did
called
I
us
say
the
Middle
Middle.
West?
I'm
I
from
meant the
the
Midwest.
as a person who's from the Midwest.
The Middle West.
People on the East Coast they don't recognize the middle of the country. Y'all Middle West people, middle of the West Side.
I'm talking like, I mean, I guess St. Louis is probably not that far from Kansas, but I'm thinking like,
no,
like
we are
Iowa.
literally in the middle of the country.
Yeah. Anywho, yeah, I don't know. It's just this like, it just felt so typical. Like it felt like a scene out of like, the Sunday comics or something. Like I hated it. I don't know how to explain it, but I hated it. And I felt so cringy and uncomfortable. And anyways, it was awful. God, I wish I could remember the thing that I was going to say that struck me, but it's gone now. But either way, yes, all of that to say that, yeah, that really resonated with me too, because I feel like I've had just like similar experiences in different places. And yeah, I don't know, but.
Yeah, I will say the other part of this chapter that hit me, and I don't know if she was I didn't really write down, my notes are always so fragmented, but I can admittedly say that I did not know that African kings were working with Europeans to trade people, not just criminals, because I do think there was like a mention of
like criminals or war captives, like
yeah,
from war.
but trading their people, because I think I feel like it was one of the it's almost when people talk about how indigenous Native Americans in America treated black slaves. I feel like it was kind of one of those relationships. Like the Europeans came in and like okey doked them and was like, "Hey, brother, we got a deal for you." And it's kind of like, they ain't trying to kill me. So, of course, this, like, okay, I'm going to get something out of this. You get something out of this. But then realizes at any point, they really are going to kill you. Like, you're not that girl. Like,
it ain't safe.
Just,
it ain't safe.
Yeah. It's like,
yeah.
It's like, okay, you can turn on your own people. We're going to turn on you at any point. Just know that. Like, when we ready to take all this, we going to take all this. But for
your
now,
pawns.
Yeah. Because I do believe, because they talked about the warriors, which I start feeling like, I don't know if you saw that
The Woman
that
King
movie, The Woman King. Yeah.
I haven't yet.
Oh my God.
I know.
It was just like these
it's like a Black
and
Panther.
Yes. You have to go see, you have to see Woman King.
Okay.
And if you don't know how to find it, I will send you a link.
It's on Netflix, I think.
Oh, is it? Okay, good.
I thought
at
least it was at one point.
If you can't watch it the legal way, I got a way. I got another way. But oh my goodness, like having like a whole all female warrior like squad up. But like,
oh my gosh.
Like how it all started, and not everywhere, but in this part of the country, like the fact that the kings were like, it seemed like a good deal at the time, at the time, but then it just snowballed. And I don't think they realized, and I also didn't realize like how many places enslaved people, and how, I mean, it's interesting because like, oh, there's Afro-Cubans and Afro-Caribbean, like know that, but then you forget the dynamics of like how so many people were placed in other countries and placed in different places and taken from different places. It's I just felt like I've been robbed of knowledge.
Oh my God, absolutely.
And I've never read that in a history book ever. Like I did not know that Africans were enslaving Africans.
I recall like learning that, like I do remember learning that like, right, African people were complicit in slavery, that like they owned Africans and they sold Africans to European people. But I was always kind of told like, oh, it's different though. Like their version of slavery was different. It was nowhere near as brutal. Like Americans and like, Europeans took it to a whole other level. And I don't think I myself don't think I didn't know like the depth, like, and she even mentions it. She even says like in the chapter.
Yeah, they were chained
She,
up for months on walls
yeah,
and
yeah,
only given enough food to like be
yeah,
functional. Like,
yeah. And she even kind of mentions in the chapter that like, at least so originally, I think when slavery kind of started, like she mentions that like these people weren't, there was a difference between like this like kind of like African version of slavery. And I guess specifically like this was like the Republic of Dahomey, which was what Togo was known as after they gained independence, but before they changed their name to Togo. She didn't realize that she didn't realize crap, why do I keep losing my train of thought? I'm tired.
we gotta get you a
But
cookie. You need a cookie. I'm gonna
I
send you some
probably
cookies.
do. Oh, I want that. But I think what I was gonna get at is that originally, like their version of slavery was like these people were able to like regain their independence. People became variety of different reasons. Some people even chose like elected to become slaves because they like wanted to like reduce their debt or avoid paying taxes or this sort of thing. And she mentions that at least early on in the tradition of slavery in this Republic of Dahomey, that enslaved people could eventually regain their freedom, and it kind of wasn't this permanent sort of station in life. It hadn't evolved into like this caste system yet. But then over time, she learned that like leaders from the Republic of Dahomey were like traveling to Brazil and meeting with Portuguese leaders and having conversations about how, you know, slavery went with them and like what the future of these enslaved people would be once they made it to Brazil or Portugal or wherever these other countries were. And basically saying that not only like I think at some point slavery, at least in this part of Africa, was relatively innocent, but like over time through relations with European colonialists, slavery evolved even in Africa, and that these leaders from the Republic of Dahomey learned from the Portuguese people how to kind of like make slavery much more brutal and severe. And I don't know, like that I did not know. Like that
I
it was
mean,
always kind of like washed over.
it's a power trip. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like you got probably a bunch of dudes on this ego
Yeah.
trip, and it's like this is how we do it to make sure this stays sustainable and that there is no uprising. And so if you don't do this, then this can happen.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I didn't know any of it, and like I said, I did not have like I didn't go to like some elite high school, so I'm not surprised by any
Mm-hmm.
means. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't necessarily grow up in a household that was like pro black. We're gonna
Mm-hmm.
read books about, like we that just wasn't a thing. And a lot of that has just been my own journey.
Mm-hmm.
But now I want to read more books. So like if anybody got books that I should
Oh
read to
my
learn more
God.
about this, I would love to get some recommendations that isn't Chat GPT. Because
Yeah. So
I
I
gotta
actually,
stop.
okay. So I did a little rabbit hole, and I think I might have a book that I could recommend for you. I haven't read it myself, but I plan to. But it's called Barracoon, and it's like God, what was it? Let me look it up. It's by Zora Neale Hurston, and it's
Was
called The
that
Story
referenced
of.
in the book?
She mentions barracoons as like these,
Listen.
I guess, structures that Black people were kind of chained to.
Oh, okay.
Um, and I looked it up because I was like, oh, barracoon, is that where the slur coon comes from? And I actually learned, no, that's not where the slur coon comes from. It
Oh,
actually
okay.
comes from raccoon because the Whig Party, like way back in the 1800s, was like a relatively progressive party for their time. And they were like, a lot more sensitive to Black people, and their one of their emblems for the party was a raccoon. Like that was kind of like their mascot, and so that became associated with Black people, and that's where the slur came from. But this book called The Barracoon,
Hey, learning things.
yeah,
We out here teaching
it's
y'all. So make sure you subscribe.
you gonna learn today. But this book, I do think that I'm going to read it. It's called Barracoon, The Story of the Last Black Cargo by Zora Neale Hurston. And it's based on interviews that she had with this man who was presumed to be the last survivor of the Middle Passage. So I'm definitely like really curious to learn more about like, yeah, that history. And it seems like a relatively short read. It's only like about 200 pages, but that's a recommendation. And that's something that's definitely going to go on my reading list.
Got it.
But yeah, crazy. I don't even know where we were.
Well, I mean, we were just kind of jumping
Just
around our thoughts
chatting.
overall.
Yeah.
But one
Yeah.
thing that was interesting is her ultimately kind of like having her official sort of like retrace and going
Mm,
through the process of getting to the slave ship and making it to that infamous door of no return. And
mm-hmm.
I didn't write down all the names of things, but like I know she talked about the tree of forgetfulness,
Mm.
and then there was
Which is
another
so,
tree.
yeah.
There was another tree of like remembrance or something, and it was
The
like,
Tree of
and so
Return.
she did all of these things, kind of trying to, I think, put herself back into the position of her ancestors.
Yeah. She
And
drove
that
along the
was,
road. Yeah. I
yeah.
remember
And she
she
would have
like
walked if
drove.
it wasn't so hot. 'Cause-
Which I was like, I was like, if you really want to know what it was like, though,
Mhm, mhm,
you would get
mhm.
out and walk. But
No
I feel
water.
you, like,
Yeah.
I feel her. I feel her. Not trying to pass out. But yeah, like just traveling that road, walking around these trees. It's wild to think. So the tree of forgetfulness, which I was like, white people, what are y'all thinking? Like
Yeah.
you like
To
come on
forget your
now.
identity.
I would
Look,
just walk around
for,
this tree a few times. And then I
you
would
don't need
just
to remember who you are. You going in, you're going to be somebody new.
yeah,
Like,
I know. I
set.
mean, the lengths that they went to, it's crazy. But like, yo, you didn't really think that you was gonna just have me walk around this tree and I was just gonna forget everything. Like, but I don't know, whatever. Anyways, the tree of that, so that tree is no longer, but in its place is like a younger tree that has been
Yeah.
planted, I guess, more recently. But the tree of return still exists. Like that tree is still there. And I Googled it. It was smaller, at least from the pictures. It looks smaller than I thought that it would be, having been around for so long. But like, oh my God. I
Yeah. That's spooky.
Oh my God. I don't think I could. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like for me, that would just make it so real. And I don't know. I think I would probably fall apart. Like,
Yeah. And then her talk,
yeah.
and I think the thing that really struck me the most was the fact that they are building essentially an amusement park with money coming from
Yeah.
the US, a $50 million let's celebrate slavery and the history. And I'm
Wow.
like, I can't. I can't. I don't
Yeah.
I cannot consume. I can't.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it was enough for her to like there I guess somebody had did that mural or some
Hmm.
painting of like the seeing them go towards the water and then this view of them coming from, and just it's too much. It's too much.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that they should not have a museum or a history. I get it, but this
Like
it just
commodification.
it just feels, I don't know. I don't know that I need to be that immersed.
Hmm.
Like I find the
Like a live
history
slave
interesting.
ship. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, or like dive tours to go see the Sao Paulo. Like I don't even know that I
Yeah.
need to do that. Like I want to go diving because I want to go diving, but I think
Right.
I don't. I feel like if I were to dive and I saw even a part of a ship or a chain dangling, I would fall apart. Like y'all,
Hmm.
I would be no good getting back up to the
Hmm.
surface. Like there's no
Hmm.
way. Cause it's like I feel like we've been so conditioned to not even slavery, even just the
Mm.
civil rights movement. I feel like
Hmm.
we think things are so far in the past and also as if they have no effect on the present. Like
Hmm.
that it just we're desensitized.
This heritage tourism that's going on in Benin, and the United States made a $50 million investment into heritage tourism, and is kind of like, yeah, creating this entire experience that's going to have a hotel spa and a life-size replica of a slave ship and memorial gardens and a market and an area for Vodun performances, which is like this, I think, spiritual tradition in Benin. And they're gonna like renovate this fortress and the door of no return and just make it a whole immersive experience.
No.
And yeah, I don't know, I don't really love it either, especially because, you know, I can anticipate, and also just based on like her own accounts of like her experiences traveling, like most of the consumers of this are probably going to be white Americans who are,
Or Europeans.
I don't know, it's, yeah, white Americans or Europeans, who kind of like see this as almost like trauma porn. And yeah, it reminds me of just like how, you know, whenever you go to these movies that are about slavery, like, you know, 12 Years a Slave and Birth of a Nation and all of these like historical movies that kind of represent slavery narratives, like a lot of times the largest consumers of this end up being white people. I feel like whenever I go to a theater or whatever, it ends up being white people.
Here's what I will say. I'm just going to say this. I would not partake in this. And I personally feel like without ever visiting Benin, $50 million could have gone to something else in that country that I think could have been a better use of money. Like they're spending $50 million on this. $50 million so people can take the slave walk. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a bit too much. You know, I appreciate that there are museums that preserve this history. I appreciate that there are historians and archivists who are preserving this history. But I think that something about it just being this comprehensive, immersive experience feels a little icky to me. And I agree that like there are probably better uses for this money to actually directly support the population in Benin. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's just this feeling of like just, yeah, trauma porn, voyeurism, and I don't know. I think, you know, she mentions like, oh, you know, on the one hand, they are commodifying history to bolster a growing economy. And on the other hand, this is an attempt at education and remembrance. And I think, you know, capitalism is never really about anything but money. You know, they can like
Mm-hmm.
stick a little label on it and try to, you know, it's convenient to say like, oh, this is an educational experience. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the root of all of this is money. And that just really kind of makes it, I don't know, it gives me the ick a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I I I I can't support this. I just I don't know.
Yeah.
I have nothing. Yeah, I just left, she left chapter 8. I think she used the words weary and exhausted,
Yeah.
and I also left chapter 8 weary and exhausted. I was like
Yeah.
I was drained. I mean, I don't even need to do that walk, that process, see that museum, go through any of that to just feel like, damn, like
Yeah.
it's just a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you know, I don't know, I guess to maybe, so, I mean, it sounds like she's having a lot of really complex feelings, but I think just being hit with the reality of like how nuanced and how complex slavery was, how complex, how I don't know, I guess the complexity of how that history has led us to this moment and feeling like somewhat disconnected from her ancestry and, you know, the continent of Africa where, you know, her lineage ultimately originates from. I think there's just like a lot of feelings there that she leaves with, and there's just a heaviness. Um, but we head into chapter 9. Any final thoughts on chapter 8, or
No,
you feel
it
ready?
was a lot.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was a lot. There's a lot, and we didn't. I don't even think we like really dove deep into like everything. There was so
No.
much more there, but yeah, I don't know. And there were also just like names and places and events that she referenced that I really want to dive deeper into. But it leaves on a heavy note, but then we get into chapter 9, and I think things start to look a little bit brighter. She heads
Senegal.
to, yeah, Senegal, the
What?
origin of my fave Issa Rae,
I
our
know. That's
family
what I
tree.
think. Did you see Issa go to Senegal?
No.
There's this I couldn't even tell you the name of it, but there's this TV show and it's
Mm,
like a culinary show where the guy takes people back to their hometown and they explore the culinary history. And so he took
mm,
her to Senegal. And I think too, I remember when she was posting from Senegal, even though I'm sure she goes there often enough, but this may not have
mm,
been during that. But I only watched that one episode because I wanted to see her. Um,
mm.
and oh my goodness, I want to go to Senegal so bad now. I
Wow.
really do
Yeah.
want to go.
Ooh, yeah. Oh man. All I know about Senegal is Senegalese twist and how those were my jam back in the day. That's terrible. But I did learn quite a bit about it through this chapter. And yeah, I would love to visit. I bet the food is bomb.
And here's the other, I guess the other thing that, I know we mentioned this in a previous episode about how in parts of Africa, like people speak Portuguese. And so,
Mm,
like in Senegal, they speak French. And
mm,
I guess the levels of colonization just never really hit me as to
mm,
why that's the language. Like, why
mm,
do people speak a language from a
mm,
different continent? And it's like,
mm,
oh, yes, because French colonized these areas. I was like, I
and
don't know.
force them to adopt that language. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I don't think I really hits me that much either. Or even like just thinking about like I don't know, I feel like certain countries have like these little like reminders of the influence of their colonizers like I think about Australia and the flag in Australia and how it like resembles the British flag in a lot of ways, and that's because the British colonized Australia. And yeah, I don't know. There's, I'm sure other things too, but
And I
but
mean,
yeah,
they
that is
have
interesting.
some people obviously still have the native languages. And I
Yeah.
noticed, like, even in the episode that I was watching, like, there were some people who were speaking French and then some people who were speaking, I don't know the language, but they weren't
Yeah.
speaking French. And so it was
Yeah.
interesting because they had to translate for Issa what that elder was saying. And I
Hmm.
was just like, I don't know. That's just so fascinating to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, she's in
Well,
Senegal.
she is in Senegal. She's visiting her friend Karima's house. I don't know how long she ended up staying there, but she says that she was there for a week. When she kind of like brings us into the story. And she talks a little bit about her friendship with Karima and how they met back in college. And Karima um, has like a long history, like her family has a long history in Senegal. Her mother's like lineage used to basically run the country. Her great aunt was the first woman prime minister. She comes from a long line of Islamic cleric judges that had a lot of power and leadership, and she can trace her roots there back to the 1400s, which is just so beautiful. Like I truly envy that. But yeah, she is very close friends with her, and now Karima has like built a life in Senegal and has like a career and has done a lot, specifically in the realm of children's education. But she and Karima end up like getting into a conversation, and she's telling Karima about all of her travels and about how she's been really disappointed in her experience. She talks about like her time in Mozambique, her time in South Africa, about how hard walking the slave route hit her, about how she doesn't feel welcome in Africa and hasn't felt welcome. And Karima says, like, kind of challenges her and really pushes back and is like, I think these are actually critiques that are veiled as questions. And I don't know, that really struck me. I thought that that was really interesting. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I'll just read kind of like a quick excerpt, but she says, she holds up a hand before I can interrupt. What I think you and those other folks are really trying to ask is, how do I get close to this continent? How do I feel it and truly connect with it? And I think that is a much more powerful question. It is not judgmental, it is not limiting, and it gives space for ideas to arise. And I don't know, I thought that that was really powerful because I don't think it is so divergent from the original question that she's asking, that Tara is asking. Like, I think it still gets to the root and the core of, like, I think the answer to that question will satisfy what Tara feels like she's missing. Um, but it frames it in a different way that I think, you know, encourages like curiosity and like just a willingness to participate in like coming up with a solution rather than like this passive, like, why aren't things going the way that I expected them to?
Yeah, this hopelessness of like there's no end in sight, there's no solution, there's no that this is this is history and questions and like experiences that so many people before her have had. And I think
Mm-hmm.
she was kind of just trying to be like, you aren't unique to this, and
Mm-hmm.
you have the power
Mm-hmm.
to, you know, with your voice, you have the power to actually help answer these questions that you have for people who also have them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, again, we kind of like keep coming back to this idea of like Black Americans having this feeling of longing and where is home and where do we belong? And I think, I don't know, it is a really interesting and unique, it feels like a unique experience to be a Black American because it's like, I do, again, believe that African American culture is so rich and I love being Black. I would not trade it for anything in the world. But at the same time, um, there is just like something missing. Like it's like I literally don't even know where my ancestors came from. I couldn't tell you beyond Houston, Texas,
yeah.
where my ancestors came from. And yeah, I think, you know, I like that they really kind of like try to like take time and tackle this question together. She says something else that's really interesting, and I think I've heard this quote before. But Karima says, she says, I came across this quote the other day. I'm not sure who said it. To be African American is to be African without any memory and American without any privilege. And I was like, ooh,
I know that needs to be on a t-shirt. I wrote that one
yeah,
down too. I was like,
yeah,
bars. Like
yeah,
that is so
yeah,
true. Like
yeah.
it
It's
is,
profound.
and I don't, I wrote this before, I wrote this after I wrote a comment because I'm always curious about people's response to this because I have my own thoughts. But
Yeah.
there are a segment of people in America who don't like to be referred to as African American.
Mm-hmm.
And there's people who don't like to be referred to as Black. And
Mm-hmm.
so the topic or the debate of the episode
Mm-hmm.
is, which have you ever felt like you needed to be on one side of those lines, or do you
Mm-hmm.
just ride the wave of whatever you want to refer to me as, you refer to me as? Like, what
Mm.
has kind of been your identity pope in that conversation?
Yeah. That is a good question. I have always resonated with Black. Like I've always just felt Black. I've never felt,
Ditto, ditto.
you know, like, and I wish that I could say that that African American resonated with me more, but I honestly feel like African American is a term more so for
White
white
people,
people to
yes.
feel like,
Uh-huh.
you know, to feel like I don't really know what the feeling is rooted in, but I feel like it's like it simplifies things for them. And so it's like, oh, okay, well, we can just like call them this thing, but it's like there
So
is a
do we
huge
call them white
dissonance.
American?
Right. Or like French American or Irish
Yeah,
American. Like at this point, they're just American,
yeah.
you know? Like, yeah. And like even, I mean, like Chinese Americans, for example, actually like they actually came from China, or their parents came from China, or their grandparents came from China, but they can draw a direct line
Yeah.
between themselves and China. And also, China is a country, not a continent.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it's just like
Right? Like I
such
can't
an
be Senegalese
oversimplification.
American. Like
Yeah.
you can't place me into this big ass like box that I
Mm-hmm.
don't
Yeah.
feel any connection to. I've never
Yeah.
been. Most black Americans will never go to Africa.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
cost of a flight alone like is not something that
That's
most
like a couple months mortgage, depending on where you live.
you
Like,
know, I mean, it's crazy. And so
yeah.
I just that term always felt weird to me. I'm like
Yeah.
African American, like what? And it's not that
Yeah.
I don't want to have a connection to any type of African history that I'm sure is running through my blood.
Yeah.
I just didn't feel like that was a representation. I'm like, look, because to me, black is a culture, and it's a culture that we
Mm-hmm.
created off of this. What I do remember is the history of Jim Crow era, civil rights
Mm-hmm.
era, like
Mm-hmm.
those things that my parents can tell me stories of. Well, the living
Mm-hmm.
parent that I have can tell me these stories of and remember,
Mm-hmm.
whites only signs and things like that were not far off. Like that is
Mm-hmm.
my direct lineage. That's what I remember. And
Yeah. 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 So I don't know. I feel like it's just like, yeah, this like easy way to kind of categorize. And it feels, yeah, like an oversimplification and a little bit callous and dismissive almost. Like it's like, so we just gonna pretend like I know anything about Africa.
yeah.
Like we just gonna pretend like y'all didn't try to erase, like deliberately erase any connection that I have with, not like with, I mean with the continent, but like also with the actual countries that my ancestors originated from. But yeah, I don't know. It's also interesting to think about like the evolution of um I don't know, names for black people. It is so
Oh
sorry.
yeah.
This is I think about this sometimes, and it like just it's like it's like a jarring, like it mind-blowing type of thing where it's like, wow, we really are like, to be like black people are so objectified in America. It's like literally a talking point, like a campaign point for politicians, like my identity is like argued over and debated over in public forums as if I'm not even in the room. Like it's like really crazy. But yeah, I don't know. It's just that is a whole thing. And yeah, I think that's very interesting. But yeah, I'm black. Blackity black black black.
Yep. Same here. I was like, you will never hear me refer to myself as African American unless I'm
African
checking a box
American.
on a form, because that's the
Yeah.
option.
Right, exactly. Um yeah, so this African American without memory, or African without memory, American without privilege. I resonate with that a lot. And when I read that, my immediate thought was like, but black people do have privilege. But I think it was really important, like the way she contextualized it was really important, because I was like, right, we do have privilege. Like, case in point, we go to countries like Mozambique or like other parts of Africa, and we're seen as American, and as we're immediately assumed to be like wealthy or have like, yeah, basically a certain degree of wealth, just because we come from America. But Tara goes on to write, even though African Americans do have a kind of privilege, as I have come to realize on this journey, just not at home and only over other brown and black people in other parts of the world. What kind of privilege is that?
Yeah.
Woo! um, let that sink in.
Yeah, because then you just have this guilt. It's like,
Yeah.
is that really I don't feel good about
Like,
the fact that
yeah.
I don't have to run around and like try to sell paintings and stuff to be like, I don't,
Yeah, just aligning with the side of the oppressor, like being like lumped in. Like I don't know. I can imagine that it is like a very painful experience to realize that like these people who look more like you than the people from your home country align you more with like the oppressors and the colonizers of your home country than they do with themselves. Like, I don't know, that like really hit me. And I was like, wow, like it's rough. It's tough because it's like, yeah, I feel her. Like, it's like, I want to feel like that gap is closed, like that distance is closed. And it's like, it just seems like it's not going to be that easy. And that, like, I feel like that is like this utopian, like, oh my God, yeah, like I'll just go to Africa and like I'll just get it and they'll just get me and we'll just get each other. And it's like, it's just not that simple. And the chasm is too great at this point, and it has to be kind of like bridged again. And we have to figure out how to do that. And I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know how it will happen, if it will happen in my lifetime, but
Yeah.
it definitely feels almost impossible. Like I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't see it.
And I mean, I have like, I don't know. And I don't know like what the end result looks like. Like it's like I imagine like I'm not an artist or a painter, but I hear artists say like the biggest issue that artists have is they never know when the work is complete. And I don't know if there's ever a completion, or like if we'll ever get to a point where we have arrived and we now like have this like seamless connection between like Black people and African people, or Black Americans and African people. But I think of like, I don't know. I think about like I feel like hopefully I have hope that like that that gap is being bridged just through things like how she mentioned, like, this kind of like connection between like the music that she grew up hearing in Black churches and the music that she hears in African church, in this South African church. And I do think that there is like, I mean, to say Black people don't have culture is wild, because not only is Black culture like such a big aspect of American culture, but like Black culture is like recognized and consumed all over the world. Like it is like pop culture. But anyways, I don't know. I just have hope that like there is this like, even through like just sharing culture and like appreciating one another's culture and like kind of like bouncing off of one another's culture. Like I have hope that like at least in those kinds of ways that gap is being bridged. And I know that there's so much more to it than that, but it feels like a start or something meaningful to start to like,
I mean,
yeah.
I love that hope for you. I guess for me, I guess for me it feels like unless you do some sort of like, I can't think of the name of the movie, but like some sort of
Mm,
switching places type of thing. It's
mm,
almost like you can embrace my culture, both sides. Black folks
mm,
wearing kente cloth and Africans listening to jazz or whatever gospel music. But I still think there will always be a bit of a disconnect
mm,
without knowing. And I mean, I guess the
mm,
only sort of linear connection maybe is apartheid, folks who kind of experienced
mm,
apartheid, since there is such
mm,
a direct connection there. But I just feel like Africans and Black Americans will kind of always be these two forces on two
mm,
sides of the road that don't
mm,
exactly know which way to cross. Like,
mm,
we see each other, we feel the connections, but like getting here is
mm,
like, that feels like it would take an entire movement, which heck, we might be in that movement right now. I don't know. We might all be on
yeah.
planes to Africa soon. So who in the heck knows?
I might actually,
Board
I
that.
think I might be down because it is ghetto over here. Okay.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's rough. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think that like they have this like very rich conversation, she and Karima, about, you know, like how do we, right, like there's so much to it. There's like, right, we need to kind of like redefine who we are as Black Americans, what our relationship is to Africa. There's also this thing that I didn't really think about, or this idea that I didn't really think about, that like, right, like this, I don't know exactly, I don't remember exactly how she words it, but it's like this idea that like, you know, this obsession or this like desire to like just like think of Africa as like one thing, or like even Pan-Africanism like can be problematic and harmful in some ways, because it's a narrative that's sort of been passed down to us by like white Europeans and like colonialists, and like this is a narrative that's been fed to us about like how we should maybe like see ourselves in relation to Africa, and how do we get out of telling these stories about ourselves that are created about, or that were created and defined by other people. And I need to like sit with that and think about that a little bit more, but it is interesting, I don't know, to think about like how much of our perception of what our relationship with Africa and like black Africans uh should be is like defined or like fed to us by somebody else. I don't know. I think that's interesting. But she just kind of talks about also, Karima, like she basically says, you know, like you're looking for a home in Africa, but it's like Africa's not even really a home to African people. Like the slave trade has just messed us up so much. And God, I wish, she says,
The slave
um,
trade, war, civil wars, like
yeah,
so much has
yeah,
happened that people aren't even in the place where they, you know, I don't know if it was her or the educator that she spoke
mm,
to that was just talking about how so much of Africa is like it isn't this finite place and this thing. Like there's or maybe it was even in the last chapter. It's not just this one singular continent. It is made up
yeah,
of so many different places and cultures that have been disrupted.
yeah. Right. And like, I don't, God, it was maybe in the last chapter, but she was talking to this French guy who's like the manager of the hotel. And he was talking about how, like, do you call, do you think that like Russian people, and like, do you automatically assume basically that Russian people and like German people and English people and French people, like, do you automatically assume that they like have this like unity and this like relationship, and that they kind of like, and it's like, I don't know, I hadn't really, like, I've thought about that, but I hadn't really put it in those terms where it's like, right, I think that Black Americans have this like very idyllic view of Africa and like the unity that must exist there, because we have been, because there is so much like
Shared experience.
historical strife. Well, like historical strife here in America. And I think that like because there's so much distance between Black Americans and like their ancestral homelands, like I think in our imagination has, our imagination and potentially like, you know, narratives that were fed to us by like our oppressors is, you know, I don't know, there's just this idyllic view that like there's Africa is just like one thing. And it's like, nah, Europeans were fighting with other Europeans, and like, you know, it was like a lot of grief and strife. And why wouldn't Africa even had the history of like slavery and colonialism and all of that, like had that not even occurred, like we still couldn't necessarily expect Africa to just be this like, you know, peaceful like Pangea where everybody's like kumbayaing and getting along. Like these are just people at the end of the day. And she kind of like touches on it, like saying like, you know, for the last 10,000 years, like people have been treating other people terribly. Like that's
Yeah.
just kind of like the nature of humanity.
Yeah.
Um, at least that's part of the nature of humanity. It's just like, you know, power, control, possession, like intimidation, like all of that stuff. And that it's kind of like ubiquitous to all humans. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It is like, I thought that that was a really interesting perspective. Karima says Africa has been so destroyed psychologically in the world in terms of its image, in terms of its history. And so it's hard for us to say, yeah, we can have a home here for anybody else until we can say, yeah, this place is a human rights space where all human beings can come and live decent lives. And it's just, I had never really thought about the fact that like Africa is going through its own stuff, like they're
Mm-hmm.
going through, the people there, the people, across the continent are going through their own shit. So to kind of like assume that it would just be a haven for us just because we have the same complexion is like a really privileged
Naive.
and almost like a privileged, naive, and like almost a little entitled to, yeah, to think that way. I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also just interesting like to think about like I wonder, I mean, so as Black Americans who have been removed from our ancestral homeland, like we obviously think a lot about like that missing piece. Like where did we come from? Where did our ancestors come from? And I wonder, and it sounds like I have the answer to that, but like does that work in the inverse? Like, how much do African people think about African Americans? Like, how much do they feel like a disconnect with us and like, a longingness to like bridge the gap with us? And I think that it is definitely skewed in one direction. um, but I don't know. It's all
I also
just
think they have
very
other things
interesting.
to think about. I mean, depending on
Yeah.
where you're from. I don't know if you ever read What is the What? Um,
Mm-mm.
yeah, it's kind of, it's not really like autobiographical, but it is
Mm.
based on a true story, and it's kind of this story of this boy soldier and what he was going through. I want to say it was the Congo, but I could be completely wrong.
Mm.
And so, he just like fled. He became a soldier and then ran away and got and tried to get out of it and trying to get to America. Like, it's interesting when you think about the slave trade and people, you know, taking people from Africa to America. Then you have the civil wars that broke out in parts of
Mm-hmm.
Africa, and people who were trying to get to America because it was safer for them to be a refugee in America than to be in Africa. And then, so us on the other side who have experienced levels of racism and discrimination and wanting to not be in America.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And and again, it's never stopped. It's nonstop.
Mm-hmm.
I know I wrote in my notes that it's ongoing Black trauma. Like every
Mm-hmm.
10 or so years something has happened. Like we've never had a reprieve. I mean, we there's been, you would have a moment of Black Wall Street, and then what happened?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like as
Mm-hmm.
soon as we get a little bit of life,
Mm-hmm.
it just gets chopped down.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yeah.
and even now, like, I mean, there's like a whole exodus movement for say, because we know that America is probably the least safe for Black women, Black trans women. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we are not safe in this country no matter what you say, think, or feel.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that there were laws that had to be put in place in the workplace so that we didn't get discriminated against. Like when I first moved to New York, it was kind of crazy because
Mm-hmm.
people were like, "Oh, you have a better chance." I was actually staying with a older, like 50-plus-year-old white guy, and he was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Well, you have a much better chance of finding a job here than me because everything you check almost every box. They want Black, they want a woman, and then don't let you be queer, then you're really good." And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, wow." And that was a criteria that a lot of companies, because, and I know that's a whole nother debate for a whole nother day, and people feeling like, "Oh, you're not qualified because they had to check a box." And it's like, no, I was
Mm-hmm.
qualified. I was just given an opportunity that I normally
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have been because of my
Mm-hmm.
race, because of my gender, because of these, sometimes sexuality. Like, this is the world that we live in, and now we've reversed a
Yeah.
lot of that to where it's like, what chances do we have of prosperity? And now we're going, it's like 2 steps forward, 8 steps back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, um, so
We're running up on 40 minutes, just FYI.
okay, yeah. I mean, I think like the gist of this chapter, I think, is that she is like it is like really being tied together, and she's having a moment to like process. Sorry, there's like a bug. I'm
Yeah,
worried about aphids getting in my house.
and the sun. No.
But I don't think it's happened. But I'm like every time I see a bug, I'm like, no, 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 kill it. Anyways,
The sun
sorry.
is really doing a thing too, just FYI.
Yeah, I'm
I didn't even
blind.
realize you were standing in front of a window or sitting in front of a window until now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, now it's very obvious now. um, but yeah, I think what the kind of like main takeaway from this chapter, I think, is that she like really gets an opportunity to like process a lot of what she's experienced through the lens and through like conversation with a really close friend, and it really helps her to kind of like shift her perspective. And I think that she ends up, you know, leaving Senegal with a lot of optimism. Her friend like really encourages her to kind of figure out where is home for you, and recognizing that home might not be the country where your ancestors came from. It might be a totally different country. It might not be a place at all. Like, it might be an experience or, a certain situation that you find yourself in. She suggested that for Tara, it was like being out on the dance floor. But just saying that, like, Tara has an opportunity, and I think all Black people across the diaspora have an opportunity to kind of like really decide who they are and really kind of create a new future for African people, for Black people, for, yeah, Black people all across the diaspora. Um, there was one, I don't know, I think that kind of like basically sums it up. Like, I don't know if you had anything that you would add to that, but that was kind of like my takeaway.
Yeah, I just know like
Alrighty.
at this point, this was kind of her, I don't know, it was like a reawakening of starting to feel like some of those answers are getting or some of those questions are getting answered.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I don't know if this is right, but I feel like, that's when she was like, it's time for me to go back to South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I was like, Afropunk, yes.
Yeah, I didn't even know they had one in
Oh, I
South
did.
Africa. That's so cool. Oh my
Yes.
God. Yeah, that's so
Yes.
Afropunk and then scuba diving in South Africa? Question
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
mark. um yeah, she kind of she takes some time sitting on a beach and like processing and reflecting on all of it, and she's like, I don't think Senegal is the place where I feel like home. Like, even though these people look a lot more familiar to me, South Africa resonated with her a lot more. And so, yeah, she makes the decision to head back to South Africa. Um, but before she does that, um, yeah,
She makes a call.
yeah, before she does that, she makes a call to Anna, who was the woman from chapter 7, who, basically kind of grilled her on her spirituality and kind of like, I don't want to say projected, because it definitely sounds like this resonated with Tara, but at the moment, at least, it kind of felt like a projection of like, oh, you Black Americans are just lost, and you like, are just looking for a connection and belonging. And I really hope that you kind of find what you're looking for. But she calls Anna, and she's like, I think, she just kind of shares her experience with her, and her reflections. And I don't know, I think that it was like a real kind of like, yeah, it sounded like this was like exactly what Tara needed to really wrap up this part of her travels. Anna like apologizes for being so intense
Yeah, a little extra, just a little
and
extra.
being so hard on her, but also really sympathizes with what Tara is going through and what she's feeling, saying like, I can't say that I understand exactly what you've been through or what you go through, but like my heart breaks for you because I know that we are connected, and if I could like help you find whatever missing link it is that you're looking for, like I would do that. But I don't know. I think she like sympathizes with like, right, I get that you're like struggling with this. I get that you're struggling with like maybe some sense of identity, and that resonates with me. And I can't, give you the exact answers you're looking for, but just know that I see you and like, I embrace you. And yeah, I think that really meant a lot for Tara. And it kind of comes full circle because, right, I think Anna is what that conversation is what spurred at least the Benin and Togo part of her journey, which was a huge kind of like, you know, a huge part of her experience and a huge part of like this kind of like deep reflection that she ends up having, and then to kind of like come full circle and be validated and affirmed by the person who maybe challenged her to go on that journey. I'm sure that was like very positive and welcome. So
Yeah, no, it's a
yeah.
good way to end that in that chapter.
I'm like still low key kind of side eyeing Anna though. I'm like, why you ain't have to do all that? Like it was you did too much, but okay. Like, if Tara's cool with her, I guess I'm cool with her too.
Yeah. I mean, I think she challenged her on the spiritual stuff, but I think she was also challenging her just on in general. I don't need I
Yeah,
think it was so much bigger than the spirituality, so I think it was good
definitely.
for her to get that. Sometimes we have to hear things that make us uncomfortable or that we don't like to
Yeah.
really see ourselves.
Yeah, totally. And I think, it all ended up being very good. And I think that it sounds like she really appreciated that. So, yeah. At the moment, though, I was like, I don't know how I feel about her. But shout out to Anna because, I think that it did make a really lasting impact for Tara. And it was a huge part of this book and this story. So I'm really grateful to have gotten to kind of like get an account of what that experience was like for her. So yeah, and then next chapter she's heading back to South Africa. I love this like just freedom to be like I'm just
Just
gonna go.
go. I know. I'm
I
trying
know
to
I said
be
I was gonna go to
I know.
Senegal, but let me just make a pit stop. Like
That's the life I'm trying to live right now. I ain't
Mhm.
there, but I'm trying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's interesting because none of these three chapters really mention anything at all about
Yeah.
scuba diving, or, I know that like throughout this experience, she's like interviewing people and doing photography and like still continuing to document the work that the Slave Rex Project is doing. But I appreciated that we took a moment to like get really deep and really personal. And yeah, I don't know. So I'm
Yeah, I
very
mean,
excited to continue.
it's a
Yeah.
story about the story and the storyteller. So it was good to
Hmm.
kind of designate that time. So
Yeah.
I think we agreed next time we're gonna do two chapters. Cause
Well, I
aren't
guess,
I could have swore that the next two chapters were long, but you said you thought chapter 10 was only a couple pages. I thought it was
well,
longer.
10 is like 2 pages. The 10 is like 2 pages, and then 11 and 12 are pretty long. So, I mean, I guess we could technically still do three. Like, we
Oh,
could
okay.
do 10,
Okay.
and then, like, yeah, 12 and
It must
13
have
are
been
the
so
longer
short that I
ones.
completely missed it. So
Yeah.
that
It's very
works.
short. Yeah, cool. Okay, that sounds great.
All right,
Fabulous.
folks.
So,
So we
yes.
will be back with y'all next time to read chapters 10 through 12. But yeah, you can check for us on TikTok. We're over at TikTok. I occasionally post clips uh, when I feel like posting clips. If you want to watch it, we're on YouTube. But yeah, just make sure if you can, just hit that follow button if you follow us on Spotify or Apple,
Mhm.
wherever, or if you're on YouTube, hit subscribe and just
Yeah, engage with
throw some
us.
sisters a couple likes.
Yeah,
And you can
yeah. Just,
join the club
uh,
on our
join
website.
the club. Yeah,
Yes.
Spotify has comments now, so you can engage with us there.
And what
Or
what
yeah,
book should
on
we read
YouTube.
next? We're debating on the next book because we only got
Ooh.
two more episodes for this book. So, got to
Yeah.
if you got any suggestions, let us know.
Yeah, I'm super excited to hear any suggestions people have. I have a couple ideas myself, but I really want to know what the people think. So, yeah, please let us know.
All right. Well, this has been Books and Boulders. We will see y'all next time. Books and Boulders, an adventure podcast produced by First Outdoor Company for climbers, readers, and everyone in between. Subscribe now and join the BB Book Club.